CBS News 24/7. I'm Elizabeth Cook. A stunning setback for President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. What comes next after conservative lawmakers banded together to derail the sweeping legislation? And a very scary sight in the sky for people in the Midwest where multiple twisters touched down and severe storms flattening homes and ripping off rooftops. We are on the ground in one area that's still picking up the pieces. Meteorologist Jessica Birch will show you where that storm system is headed next. And hundreds of thousands of commuters left in the lurch on the East Coast. The first strike of its kind in decades is bringing trains to a screeching halt, what transit workers are demanding right now. But first, the breaking news on Capitol Hill. The so-called Big Beautiful Bill just failed to clear the House Budget Committee. Now, this is the legislative package that is expected to deliver President Trump's domestic priorities. President Trump earlier today posting to Truth Social saying Republicans must unite behind the one big beautiful bill. We don't need grandstanders in the Republican Party. Stop talking and get it done. The proposed bill includes cuts to Medicaid and food stamps. It's part of an effort to slash spending by at least $880 billion to help pay for tax cuts. Now, two key votes came from these Republican Congress members, Representatives Ralph Norman and Chip Roy. They are two conservatives who say the cuts just don't go far enough. Other Republican no votes came from Representatives Clyde and Brackeen.
On the vote, there were 16 ayes and 21 noes.
Well, the noes have it. The committee stands in recess, subject to the call of the chair. I want to thank everybody for their time and patience, and Godspeed and safe travels.
Okay, so here now is CBS News congressional reporter Torian Small. Torian, walk us through what happened here.
Yeah, so those four voted no because they had some pretty critical disagreements with the state of the bill. Most of them believed that those spending cuts didn't go deep enough, and they're also part of the House Freedom Caucus. I should also point out that one other Republican voted no. In his words, though, this was a strategic change. It was out of procedural reasons in the hope that they could eventually get the votes at a later date to pass this bill and not completely kill it. That's Lloyd Smucker. He just put out, talked to our team on the Hill, and he said that he believes ideally he could get that vote or get the votes needed to pass this bill on Monday. That's still TBD. That's out of the way. Right now, though, what we're looking at is the conflict in terms of where the party is when it comes to this bill. Like I said, Representative Chip Roy was one of the leading members defecting with the party because he believes these spending cuts aren't deep enough, especially as it relates to Medicaid. That's a big issue for quite a few moderate Republicans who had concerns that it would negatively impact their constituents. He's saying, however, those cuts don't go deep enough considering the $3.8 trillion price tag that comes with extending the 2017 Trump tax cuts.
Okay, so what happens now that the vote has failed? I mean, I know the goal was to get it passed before the Memorial Day weekend. Is that going to even be possible?
Yeah, we're waiting to get an updated timeline from leadership to see if that's still possible. Again, Smucker believes if they can come back and vote it out of committee favorably on Monday, then they could line up with that Memorial Day weekend timeline that House Speaker Mike Johnson initially set. If that doesn't happen, no, it's TBD. That will likely mean these bills have to go through their respective committees again in order to match up or line up with where these House Freedom Caucus members would like to see these deeper cuts happen. We also know that the House Freedom Caucus put out a statement not too long ago saying that they are working in good faith with leadership to continue these negotiations. And Congressman Roy did warn that this committee should recess before a vote happens to avoid this embarrassment. As it stands now, though, staff have informed us that members, outside of those members, were told to go home for the weekend. So we'll see where things stand when they get a fresh look at this on Monday.
So have we heard from any senators in this process at all?
Yeah, it's unclear even if this did pass favorably out of committee and this went to the floor for a vote and it passed the full chamber, that there would be enough support from Republican senators. Rand Paul of Kentucky has come out and said that he didn't believe that the spending cuts were deep enough. And then you also have some usual suspects like Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski, who have defected from the party before when it comes to Trump's agenda. There's also Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, who put out an op-ed last week saying that Republicans should be cautious about any cuts to Medicaid, especially considering this is essentially cutting about $880 billion over the next 10 years. So we'll see whether or not the negotiations that happen on that side of the chamber will then get to this side, and then it would be satisfactory enough to get the consensus needed in order for it to go through.
Yeah, they're going to need every single Republican vote to get this thing passed. Torian Small, live for us on Capitol Hill. Have a great weekend. Always good to see you. All right, let's head over to Ukraine now, where they are rallying support from their Western allies after Kyiv and Moscow failed to agree to a ceasefire deal. They held their first direct talks in more than 3 years today in Turkey, but negotiations ended after less than 2 hours. Now, however, the two sides have agreed to an exchange of up to 1,000 prisoners each. That's according to the head of both delegations. Speaking today at a summit in Albania, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had this to say about that meeting. Take a listen.
This war Russia against Ukraine must be ended as soon as possible and in a just way. Ukraine needs peace. Peace in Europe depends on whether Ukraine will get it. All of you know that this week we had a real chance to take important steps toward ending this war, if only Putin had not been afraid to come to Turkey. I was in Ankara yesterday, and thanks for participation and hosting us, President Erdogan. And I was ready for a direct meeting with Putin, whether in Ankara or in Istanbul, and not just for a meeting, but to resolve all the important issues to my mind. But he didn't agree to anything.
Now, while all this is happening, President Donald Trump is headed back to Washington after a 4-day tour through the Middle East. While on Air Force One, a reporter asked President Trump when he would meet with Putin, and he said this. Take a listen.
Are you putting to call Vladimir Putin? How do you think you can get those talks on track?
We have to meet. He and I will meet. I think we'll solve it, or maybe not, but at least we'll know. And if we don't solve it, it'll be very interesting.
Okay, CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand is following it all live from the White House, and she joins us now. Natalie, great to see you. The president is still in the air, but we're learning that he held a phone call with Zelensky and other world leaders today. Do we know yet how he is reacting to all of this?
Well, again, you heard him in those comments saying that he doesn't believe anything is really going to move forward until he himself meets with Russian President Putin, said that they would try to do that as soon as they can arrange it. We also know from President Volodymyr Zelensky, who tweeted or posted on X about that phone call, saying that he really urged these leaders, the president included, the European leaders, to keep pressure on Russia, and Zelensky saying that if Russia rejects a full and unconditional ceasefire, that he believes sanctions should follow. Reporters have not had a chance yet to follow up with the president on that specific point, since again they are in the air coming back from this trip. But we'll have to wait and see. You know, we saw the Secretary of State express something similar, Marco Rubio, saying he doesn't think that there's going to be a breakthrough until the key players get together. And we did, Liz, just get a readout from the Russian side of things, the Kremlin saying that they take note of Ukraine requesting direct talks between the heads of state, which again did not happen during today's meeting, which just included these delegations at the lower level. And also they say that it was agreed upon to present detailed visions of a potential future ceasefire and then have negotiations continue. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, and also how the U.S. tries to put pressure on Russia if that does end up trying to move things forward.
I want to circle back to this trip to the Middle East, Natalie. He's just wrapping up this first major foreign trip of his second term. What were some of the key takeaways?
Well, the president, if you ask him earlier today on Air Force One, he touted all the business deals that were made. He says trillions of dollars in investment commitments after visiting these 3 Gulf states. That was a big part of this, especially in UAE with an emphasis on artificial intelligence and energy. Yesterday, there was news after we spoke yesterday about signing a framework to build a new AI data center in Abu Dhabi. That even despite some concerns by lawmakers here at home over security concerns with respect to that. So a lot of investment, but obviously behind the scenes there is also a lot of talk about regional stability, that historic meeting with the new president of Syria after President Trump announced that he would be lifting sanctions on Syria. That all speaks to deepening ties again between these 3 Gulf states and also efforts by the administration to try and counter Iran.
Yeah, speaking of Iran, Natalie, what's the latest on a possible nuclear deal with that country?
Well, President Trump, while on Air Force One, confirmed that his administration has presented a proposal for a possible new nuclear deal to Iran. We don't yet know the exact details, but the president also saying that he thinks Iran knows that they have to move quickly with a decision on this or something bad will happen. That, again, alluding to previous threats of a military strike if Iran does not reach an agreement to wind down their nuclear program. We know the Trump administration's position has been he does not want Iran to have the potential to build a nuclear weapon and wind down also their uranium enrichment levels. For Iran's part, it wants sanctions lifted. So we'll have to wait and see how the two sides come together after what's been 4 rounds of negotiations between the Trump administration and Iran. The president now kind of putting some additional time pressure on Iran to react to this new proposal.
Natalie Brand, live for us at the White House. Thanks so much, Natalie. Well, just a few hours ago, lawyers and family members of Sean Diddy Combs arrived at a Lower Manhattan court for the sex trafficking trial of the Bad Boy Records founder, accused of being not so good to the people closest to him. R&B singer Cassie Ventura is once again on the stand for a second day of cross-examination. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman reports from outside the courthouse with the very latest.
The defense has been working on showing this jury a different side of Cassie Ventura and potentially pointing out inconsistencies in her testimony. For one, there is an alleged rape that Cassie Ventura says took place after her breakup with Sean Combs. The defense pointed out that in a civil lawsuit, Cassie Ventura had said that rape happened in September of 2018. But she later told the government that it happened in August of 2018. We also heard some very striking audio in the courtroom today. Cassie was yelling at someone who she thought had an explicit tape of her and Sean Combs. In the audio, she is threatening to kill them. It is a very different Cassie Ventura from the one that we see on the stand. She has been collected, she has been composed, and in a way, that disjointed picture reminded me of something from during Trump's trial, President Trump. Now, his criminal trial, when his star witness, Michael Cohen, took the stand. He was very calm, very collected, but they played audio of him saying very insulting things about Trump in the courtroom, yelling, and it ended up being a key piece of evidence for that jury. One other thing I want to point out is our correspondent, Jerika Duncan, noticed something interesting. Ventura revealed that the name of the book that she wrote, which really reflects on her relationship with Sean Combs, is called The Dark Times. And years ago, when Combs was recognized by BET as an artist, he dedicated that award to Cassie for holding me down in the dark times. So there really seems to be a reference there to that in how she ended up titling the book of her experiences. Back to you.
Katrina, thank you. Well, our team continues to follow this trial from inside the courtroom today, and you can get all of their live updates and see new sketches from inside the courtroom by going to our CBS News website. Well, coming up, the latest in the case of Gilmore Abrego Garcia, the man held by mistake in a prison in El Salvador. The Trump administration wants to keep details on his case a secret. Now it's up to a judge to decide if that's even legal. You're watching CBS News 24/7.
Per incontrare persone e culture diverse.
In his first address to world diplomats, Pope Leo XIV urged people to respect the dignity of migrants. The Pope was born in Chicago but lived in Peru for many years. He says his own background made him feel compelled to call for compassion and solidarity with those seeking a better life in other countries. Pope Leo also condemned what he called a, quote, destructive urge for conquest, but didn't name any specific countries. He also talked about the Middle East and Ukraine, saying that people there are suffering most grievously. Now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio touched down in Rome today after flying in from Russia-Ukraine negotiations in Turkey. Rubio is part of a U.S. delegation attending the Pope's inaugural Mass on Sunday. Vice President J.D. Vance is leading that delegation, but no word yet if they will be meeting with the Pope or just attending the Mass. And another chapter in the legal battle over Gilmore Abrego Garcia happening right now in a Maryland courtroom. Garcia's supporters gathered outside the Greenbelt, Maryland federal courthouse, where the judge is set to hear arguments at a hearing that's just getting underway right now.
This case is beyond the immigrant community alone. This case is in defense of all of us. All of our guaranteed constitutional rights are under attack. This case impacts every single one of us here today.
Now, remember, Abrego Garcia was arrested by ICE in Baltimore on March 12th. He was then flown with other migrants to a notorious Supermax prison in El Salvador. Shortly after that, ICE admitted the deportation was a mistake. Abrego Garcia had legal protection that was supposed to protect him from deportation to El Salvador. And in April, a federal judge and the U.S. Supreme Court both ordered the Trump administration to facilitate his return to the U.S. Now, earlier this month, the Justice Department asserted state secrets privilege in those court filings, and that has led to today's hearing. That's what today's court case is really all about. So let's bring in CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoyo Garcia. Thank you so much for joining us, Camilo. Can you walk us through today's hearing?
Sure. So as you underscored, it has been weeks now since this federal judge in Maryland overseeing this hearing ruled that the Trump administration had to facilitate and effectuate the return of Gilmore Abrego Garcia because this man was sent to El Salvador despite a judge's order back in 2019 protecting him from deportation to that country in Central America. As you noted, that ruling was upheld by the Supreme Court in a 9-0 decision. But despite all of that, the Trump administration has provided little and scant details about its actual efforts to facilitate the return of this man to the U.S. And now the Justice Department and the Trump administration are arguing that they can invoke something known as the state secrets privilege to withhold information on this case to the public and to the attorneys of Mr. Abrego Garcia, arguing that releasing details, further information about this case could jeopardize and undermine American foreign policy and national security. And now this judge in Maryland will weigh the legality of that invocation of this legal doctrine and will also see if she can compel the Trump administration to provide more information as to its efforts, if any, to comply with her ruling from early April. But we can expect any adverse ruling against the administration to be appealed very quickly.
And Camilo, I want to lean into another story on the immigration front. CBS News has learned the Department of Homeland Security is requesting the National Guard be brought in at the border. What can you tell us about that?
Well, two U.S. officials tell CBS News that the Department of Homeland Security recently made an official and formal request to the Pentagon seeking the deployment of more than 20,000 active-duty National Guard troops to help DHS and immigration officials with interior immigration enforcement in the U.S. What does that mean? Well, this would be a deployment of National Guard troops with the intention and design to have those troops help ICE, CBP, and other immigration agencies and agents with interior immigration arrests in cities across the U.S. as part of that mass deportation operation that the Trump administration has been overseeing. There are two important factors at play here. This shows, obviously, that the Trump administration continues to use the military in an unprecedented way to carry out immigration enforcement. The administration has already deployed thousands of active duty troops to the border to try to militarize that area and deter illegal crossings. But now it is shifting its attention to the interior of the country to again carry out that mass deportation operation that the president has promised since the campaign. So we'll see if the Pentagon actually grants this request, but it is likely to grant it. We understand it is currently under review.
And Camila, we understand you also have an update on a story you first brought us of a Georgia teen and her father recently arrested by ICE after traffic stops in Georgia. What have you learned about that?
Yes, so this surrounds the case of Jimena Arias Cristobal, a 19-year-old Georgia teen who was arrested by ICE earlier in May after a traffic stop. She was initially charged with making an improper turn, and also with driving without a license by local officials in North Georgia. But those charges have now been dismissed. Despite that, she remains in ICE custody in detention because she is in the country without legal permission illegally, and ICE is seeking to deport her. Her father was at some point also arrested back in April, also after a traffic stop, and they were held at the same facility in Lumpkin, Georgia, overseen by ICE. But now he has been released this week, we understand, on bond after a judge granted him release. He's back with his family in Georgia, but the girl, the 19-year-old Jimena, remains in ICE custody. She has a hearing next week, and it is possible, that she could be released, but it is also possible that the government could prevail in its arguments to keep her in detention.
All right, Camila Montoyo Galvez, thank you so much. Well, Israel launches another round of airstrikes on Gaza, killing 90 people. They say this is a precursor to an even larger attack, while the humanitarian crisis in that area gets more dire. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7 in Wisconsin. As part of the state still dealing with the significant damage left behind by a series of severe storms, intense rain and winds blew through the cities of Juneau and Mayville. CBS News correspondent Lana Zach is on the ground in Juneau with more on the extent of this damage. Take a listen to that.
Well, recovery is going to take quite a while here. I spoke with the mayor. He's estimating that it'll be somewhere in the range of months, but everyone working so hard right now to get things repaired. You can even see a construction crew behind me on top of that roof. But take a look at this blue house. The roof completely taken off of it. A tree fell through the top of that house. We understand from EMS that person, Bruce, had to be rescued. We also spoke with one of his neighbors, a person by the name of Jess. She had little baby Oliver, 3 months, with her when the sirens rang, when she realized that funnel cloud was coming towards her. Take a listen.
I just was really, really scared, honestly. I was like, I couldn't articulate what was happening, but I knew that we needed to get away from the window.
Where was Oliver at that moment?
In my mom's arms. So she was the calm in the storm, really, and I was really, really scared.
Everyone here so grateful to have their lives. Fortunately, there were no fatalities and few injuries, in part because of those early warnings. I want to show you something else. Look over there. That yellow that you see over there, those were actually the sirens that alerted people to the fact that the tornado was happening. When the tornado did, in fact, rush through here, it snapped that in half, threw it over here along with the roofing. I spoke with the governor as well about recovery efforts.
People here are working hard to clean up. Thank goodness people were safe at that time of day and very few injuries. Obviously, a lot of cleanup to do, a lot of assessment on that from our vantage point, too.
Several communities are all pitching in to try and get power up and running to help with the cleanup. All of these new power cords up here have been put up since we've been here this morning. Earlier, the power lines were strewn throughout Main Street here, just as a sign of how quickly everyone is working to try and get the community of Juneau back up and running. Send it back to you.
Well, 138 million Americans are under storm threats today, widespread from Wisconsin that just dealt with active tornadoes in those overnight hours. And now we're starting to see some of these storms strengthen as they push across the Tennessee Valley and the Ohio Valley into the next 48 hours. The storm still has a lot to give. And as we head into this weekend's forecast, it's going to be a mess for a lot of community members throughout those plains and, of course, up into the Northeast, too, with soggy weather right around the corner. Take a look behind me, though. We're concerned about a couple of things. With these thunderstorms, we could see flash flooding. We could see large hail and wind damage widespread anywhere from the upper Midwest all the way over into the Tennessee Valley and the Mississippi Valley, too. And we're going to keep a close eye on this as we head into this weekend's forecast, as it's going to cause a lot of issues with travel throughout all these states. Here's where it's at right now as we head into the evening hours tonight, just around 7:30 Central Time. Anywhere from southern parts of Dallas all the way across the Mississippi and up into Cincinnati, Ohio. We'll watch some of these strong storms push off into the overnight hours closer to the Carolinas. Now, right around the corner, we're going to see more storms start to buster up as we head all the way into our Sunday forecast too. Places like Memphis and Atlanta gearing up for some on and off active weather into this weekend's forecast. But for now, this Friday afternoon, anywhere from St. Louis all the way down into Nashville, these are large communities. They're gearing up for some of the strongest storms they're going to see heading into this weekend's forecast. That means we could see tornado threat throughout the southern portions of Indiana and Indianapolis and western portions of Kentucky. You can also gear up for some strong winds too, forecasted anywhere up to around 40 to 60 miles per hour at times. The wind damage is a big concern, and as we head into our forecast tomorrow, we'll continue to keep a close eye on that severe weather outlook, stretching anywhere from Texas all the way along the Outer Banks, heading into the Carolinas and up into the Northeast too. Back to you.
Jess, thank you. Hundreds of thousands of commuters rely on one East Coast transit system every day, but today they've been left in the lurch. The first strike of its kind in decades is bringing New Jersey transit trains to a screeching halt. Our partners at CBS News New York are following this developing story. Let's listen in on their coverage from just moments ago.
New Jersey Transit Railroad engineers have walked off the job, leaving commuters scrambling for alternate options.
Yeah, they went on strike just after midnight and are now walking the picket lines. Elijah Westbrook covers transportation for us. He's live at the New Jersey Transit headquarters in Newark with the latest there. Elijah.
That's right. Good morning to you, Natalie and Mary. And the latest at this time, union leaders and New Jersey Transit leaders say that they will meet again on Sunday. They're heading back to the negotiating table to work out some kind of deal. And the hope, of course, by many is that maybe service could be resumed by Monday morning. But fingers crossed and all that. Once again, I want to give you a live look at what we're seeing out here. This is the scene outside of New Jersey Transit headquarters. And we're seeing about maybe a dozen or so locomotive engineers. They're holding up these signs that they're on strike. This is something that has impacted, of course, more than 300,000 daily commuters. The walkout you see now comes after the latest round of negotiations on Thursday didn't result in an agreement. Now, workers say they haven't had a pay raise in 5 years. New Jersey Transit has said the union walked away from the last deal, which was $49.82 an hour. They also took the issue to Washington earlier this week to meet with a federal mediator. New Jersey Transit CEO Chris Kalari described the conversations as constructive, adding that any deal must be fair and fiscally responsible. But the union still is pushing back, and leaders say at one point they were close to a deal. Let's listen to what all sides are saying about this strike.
If you just see their last budget meeting and all the monies that they put every other spot, we just seen them get 2 new boats here in the last couple of weeks. You know, I don't know why transit needs boats, but they find money for those other things. They found money for this building when the perfect building was around the corner and all the furnishings. They pay thousands of dollars a month for parking. I think they can afford just a little bit more. Long Island Railroad, who I also help represent, has not had a contract in 3 years. So the pay rate is 3 years behind. And the contract that they are offering us, the pay rate, would be 2 years from now. So now there's a 5-year gap again in the contract. So yeah, they are offering us the money. They're offering us 3 years ago money 2 years from now.
We must reach a final deal that is both fair to employees and at the same time affordable for New Jersey's commuters and taxpayers. Again, we cannot ignore the agency's fiscal realities.
Any deal we strike must be fair and fiscally responsible.
Now it's the state's first transit strike in more than 40 years. From Newark, New Jersey, Elijah Westbrook, CBS News, New York.
An update now from the parents of Adon Alexander, the Israeli-American hostage who was released by Hamas earlier this week. Alexander's parents say that he is out of the hospital, but his recovery is far from over. They say Alexander still needed medical treatment for his injuries suffered during the Hamas attack on October 7th and his 19 months in captivity. His parents say his hands are also injured from a tunnel collapsing on top of him. Alexander will stay at his grandmother's home in Tel Aviv, at least for now. His parents say as they feel a great sense of comfort, people shouldn't forget the dozens of hostages that are still being held by Hamas. Meanwhile, Israel launched dozens of airstrikes across Gaza today, killing more than 90 people and wounding hundreds. Israeli officials describing those attacks as a prelude to a larger military campaign to pressure Hamas to release those hostages. As CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Pata reports, this comes amid a dire humanitarian aid crisis in Gaza.
Hopes that President Trump's visit to the Gulf states this week could usher in a ceasefire deal and the renewal of humanitarian aid in Gaza are fading. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's vow to escalate the war until Hamas is defeated came into full force overnight. Israeli strikes across the territory lasted for several hours, adding to the week's rising death toll, many of them women and children with bodies still trapped beneath the rubble. The daily struggle for survival is not just about escaping airstrikes. The humanitarian crisis aid organizations have been warning about for weeks is no longer looming in Gaza. It is happening right now. 500,000 Palestinians face starvation. 1 million more can barely get enough food to survive. Israel's aid blockade is now in its third month, with at least 57 children dying from malnutrition over that period. It is the longest continuous siege Palestinians have endured since the war began over 19 months ago. Back to you.
Deborah, thank you. Coming up, we're going to get a closer look at the massive cleanup effort underway after an oil spill in Louisiana. You're watching CBS News 24/7. The man convicted of stabbing author Salman Rushdie has been sentenced to a maximum 25 years in prison. Hadi Matar attacked Rushdie on a lecture stage back in 2022, leaving him blind in one eye. Matar called Rushdie a hypocrite before receiving his sentence. He now faces a federal trial on terrorism-related charges that focuses on the motive behind this attack. And Chris Brown will stay in custody in the United Kingdom over an alleged assault 2 years ago. The singer appeared in a Manchester courtroom today accused of beating a music producer in a London nightclub. His case now moves to another court in London where he will appear next month. And the Department of Homeland Security and the Secret Service are investigating former FBI Director James Comey over a post he shared and then deleted on Instagram. The image showed seashells in the sand forming the numbers 8647. Now, federal officials say the post was meant to incite violence against President Trump. Comey says he thought it was just a political statement, but is against violence. In an interview with Fox News today, President Trump said the post amounted to a call for his assassination. Let's take you to Louisiana now, where cleanup efforts are underway. Nearly 3 weeks after an oil well burst and spilled tens of thousands of gallons of oil into that marsh. The Coast Guard saying there are more wells along the Gulf Coast that are getting older and growing more and more vulnerable to leaks just like this one. CBS News reporter Katie Weiss is live for us in New Orleans. Katie, you got an exclusive look at the oil spill cleanup. Is the Coast Guard even close to finishing the job?
Good question, Liz. Yeah, this is our first chance to really get a glimpse at all of the immense work that's gone in to clean up this mess that, as you said, started about 3 weeks ago. And I'm told that this cleanup effort could take a few more weeks still. It's still very much well underway. So far, 120,000 gallons of oil has been collected, of oily, watery mixture, that is, according to the Coast Guard. And it's a response effort that has now required the employment of about 350 workers to both clean up and study environmental impacts. Crews are now having to clean up the marshes by hand to try to avoid further environmental impacts. Take a listen.
This is all the containment boom that had been deployed. We had over 21,000 feet of containment boom that was deployed during this response. This area, you could see, it was where they're trying to pick up as much oil and debris as they can, and they're focused on the loose debris, which is very hard for the skimmers and everything else to pick up. It'll actually jam some of the skimming equipment. So this is a very manual, laborious task.
And I actually got a tour of a rehab facility also, Liz. It's really interesting to see some of those impacts, but in the meantime, the Coast Guard is still investigating the cause of this spill in the first place. Liz?
Yeah, I remember when you were live on the scene after that oil spill happened, Katie, and the big concern, of course, was the ecosystem in that area. It's very diverse. What kind of impact has this oil spill still had on the ecosystem there?
Well, I'm told it could take years to fully study the entire impacts to this Louisiana Gulf Coast region here. But as I mentioned, yes, I got a tour of a rehab facility that was set up just specifically to help the animals injured from this specific oil spill. And I'm told that so far 4 animals have been taken to that facility, 3 birds and 1 alligator. You're actually looking at some video that I shot yesterday of that alligator covered in oil. He was waiting yesterday morning for his bath, for some crews to arrive on scene to give him his first oil bath to get that oil off of him. Unfortunately, though, 2 of the birds that were taken to that facility were too covered in oil and they did die. But however, some good news, 1 lucky bird was able to make a full recovery and I'm told was actually released back into the wild this week. Liz?
Oh, that is good news. It is heartbreaking, though, to see those poor animals who were victims of this oil spill.
Yes.
Katie Weiss, live for us in New Orleans. Thanks
really
so much. Well, coming up, you got to see this, an incredible story of a hero dog who noticed another dog, his brother dog, was suffering a medical emergency, and then he jumped in to save its life. Oh, this is an amazing story. Get your tissue boxes ready for this one. You're watching CBS News 24/7. CBS News has obtained exclusive video from inside Newark's air traffic control showing the moment the facility experienced one of its worst outages last week. CBS News correspondent Chris Van Cleve reports on the 90-second equipment blackout and how the Federal Aviation Administration is responding.
This video shows the moment when one of these outages impacting the facility handling flights in and out of Newark hit. This was Friday, May 9th. It was a little bit before 4 in the morning. This was about a 90-second outage, and what you see are the screens that provide critical information to air traffic controllers. They're blank. It's just a black screen in this video. You get a sense then why it was so hard for controllers to track aircraft and communicate with aircraft reliably when they couldn't see what was going on. Now, again, it was a 90-second outage. It was at a particularly slow time. This was the second of these types of outages recently. It followed the one in the middle of the day, May 28th, that led to controllers seeking trauma leave. We also see the moment when most of the screens come back on. Now, this is going on as work continues to upgrade the communications and the telecommunications at that facility. Also, the FAA and the Department of Transportation are entering their 3rd day of talks with the nation's airlines about addressing the delays at Newark Airport. That likely means cutting flights ahead of the busy summer travel season. Back to you.
Chris, thanks so much. Well, a Colorado gator farm is mourning the loss of a movie star. Morris the alligator had a 3-decade career in show business, appearing in TV shows and movies, including the 1996 comedy Happy Gilmore. Who could forget that? Morris died of old age this week, living almost 80 years. CBS News Colorado reporter Spencer Wilson shows us how his memory will live on.
In some of the most scenic parts of the state lies Colorado Gators, a gator farm home to gators, as well as tortoises, emus, cows, you name it, they might have it here. The star of the show,
the happy Gilmore alligator,
also known as Morris. You've likely seen him here.
Give me my ball! Give it here! Pop it up, you dirty I swear to God, I'll rip it out of you!
Now, you won't see him in his Hollywood pen. Morris died earlier this week.
It's hard. We got to know him, got to love him for 20 years, 19 years. And they said, you know, he's old. He might live a year. He might live 10 years. He lived 19 years.
A staple of a Colorado staple that's been through it in the last few years. Between a devastating fire that took the lives of some of their animals, the loss of coworkers, and now Morris. But owner Jay Young says everything is educational.
Don't worry about yesterday. You can't change it. You know, even the day Morris died, I told people, this is the best day of my life. It's the best day of my life because it's the only one I can change.
The news of Morris's death reached even his co-star, Adam Sandler, who wrote a tribute for him on social media, saying he learned from Morris to know his worth on set.
It wasn't just R.I.P. Morris, it was a comic relief.
As for what's next, Morris will keep teaching beyond the grave as taxidermy.
People can go in and, you know, see what his teeth feel like and take pictures and things like that.
And the circle of life begins anew with a new baby emu.
Death is a part of life, and birth is a part of life. We might have to name this one Morris.
Got a little teary listening about Morris. Well, that was CBS News Colorado reporter Spencer Wilson, and Morris will certainly be missed. What a special little guy. Well, check out this incredible video out of Connecticut where one family says it shows one of their dogs keeping their French bulldog alive. The bulldog, named Yogi, suffers from severe epilepsy, and Yogi had a seizure at home with no humans around. That's when their boxer, Reggie, did not hesitate to step in to help. The family posted on social media that Reggie kept rolling Yogi over to stop him from aspirating. In fact, Reggie did it for 3 hours straight. He knew what to do. Yogi had several seizures over that time. The family says if it wasn't for Reggie, Yogi probably would not be alive today. It's clear that Reggie has amazing instincts. He had only seen Yogi have a seizure just once before this incident. The family posted that they gave Reggie a steak to reward him. He certainly deserves a lot of love and praise for that. Wow, what a hero dog. Our social media team has more great content like this on TikTok and Instagram, so please follow us at the handle CBS News. Okay, so let's take you to the ancient Croatian town of Dubrovnik, where the streets are usually packed with tourists. Many are eager to visit the locations where Game of Thrones and Star Wars: The Last Jedi were filmed. But some locals there say President Trump's comments are making them a little nervous. Earlier this month, you probably remember, Trump said that he would impose a 100% tariff on all movies produced outside of the U.S. Now, Trump didn't provide a timeline or any other real details, but now some locals in Croatia fear when it actually happens, if it happens, directors won't film there anymore and they will take a huge economic hit. We'll have much more ahead right here on CBS News 24/7. A major setback for President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. The next steps after conservative lawmakers banded together to derail the sweeping legislation. You're watching CBS News.